So, man, I'm glad you're all back. We're live again. What I want to do is I want to introduce John Casmon. Actually, the man needs no introduction. You know, a long time ago, I was on his show, and I was a contractor back then. And we were just talking about this a little bit offline about how I was making the transition to come off contracting to start helping with the Rehab Depot. And we were kind of talking a little bit about what an impact that has made, and obviously look at where we're at now, right? So the whole idea of this whole live cast, right, with Borderline Inappropriate is for stories like that, the growth, the evolution. And you don't think it came with any challenges. You don't think it came with any back talk and talk behind the back. Of course, that's part of business, you know. And at the end of the day, no matter what we do and no matter what John's about to talk about, he's an entrepreneur at the core of it. And as an entrepreneur, you have to run a business. It's not a hobby. It's not an idea, right? Because that burns out quick. It's a business. And since he has a business and he's been doing this for a very long time, he's able to get through COVID. He's able to get through what's happening in the world, right? And I'm sure he's going to touch upon a lot of that as to what he did to set himself up and why, and how that's benefited him and his family. Because the man sitting here right now with a beautiful background, he was just shoving some food in his mouth, trying to eat some lunch real quick. So he's living good. He's happy. He's smiling. So without further ado, John, please, for those who don't know you, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hey, Ryan, first and foremost, thank you for having me on the show, man. Really excited to be here. And this is a pleasure. You know, for those that don't know me, John Casmon, I'm a multifamily investor. In short, I partner with other operators and other investors, pool our money together. So instead of you going out and buying a 4-unit property yourself, we pool all the resources together. We go out and buy something larger. We can get professional management in place, build a professional team, and kind of eat off of the cash flow. So that's really the business that we're in. We have around $80 million worth of real estate that we're a part of, somewhere around
80 million. Got it.
$80 million, around 900 or so units that we're involved in right now, continuing to look to grow. And like many people, you know, just trying to find ways to continue to build and grow and connect with other people. So that's really what we're about.
That's what I'm talking about. So John, how long you been in the game, bro?
I've been investing since 2011, you know, really focusing on our work with other people for the last 4 years. But prior to that, building my own personal portfolio. I come from corporate America. So, you know, Ryan, as we talked about when I had you on episode, I believe it was episode 20 of Target Market Insights, which is crazy.
You did your research before you came on. You can't just spit out 20 because you're at like 205.
I just Googled real quick. We just hit episode 200. And what Ryan doesn't know, or maybe he doesn't know, is his episode is actually the most downloaded episode of our entire catalog.
Hold on, let me write that down. Most downloaded. Right. Why do you think that is, John? Because when a contractor comes out firing bullets about contracting, every investor should pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, the title of the show is Secrets to Getting a Good Contractor. And the reality is it's something that many people struggle with. And there's so much talk about every other aspect of the deal, you know, how to get a good property manager, how to, you know, lease a unit, all these different things. But the one issue that many people struggle with is finding that good contractor, because that's the world that many folks don't understand. And for me, I can speak from my own experience, you know, coming from corporate America, understanding project management, understanding teams, understanding, you know, the way things are supposed to work. What I didn't realize was just because we sit here, you have a conversation with the contractor, doesn't mean that they're going to go and run with exactly what you said. First of all, it's a budgeting issue. It's a communication issue, because, you know, you almost have to look at it from a standpoint of, if it's not in writing and really crystal clear and budget attached to it, then it's not really something that you can bet on or bank on, right? And even then, you still need to follow up and make sure that everything happened the way you expected. So I think that episode just opened up eyes to the struggles and the pains that people were going through. And people continue to look at that episode and download that episode. So we talk a lot about it. I think it's a really important aspect of real estate investing that not enough people talk about.
No, man, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you putting me on, because that's actually clearly my passion. That's what we do, right? We built everything you possibly can around it, camps and academies and classes and coursework and live speaking, and just creating that awareness that, listen, you guys have to understand the other side of the fence, you know, accountability as a business owner, accountability as an entrepreneur, accountability as an investor, right? You hire a contractor for a service, so therefore you're the plug and play. Right? You hire me, let's say I was your contractor back in the day. If you didn't provide me a plug and play, I'm going to do what I'm going to do to make my money, because I have to make sure I'm making my money. I can't trust that you don't have a process, because clearly you don't. If you did, I'd be in it. See what I'm saying? So back in the day, there was a lot of investors that didn't like working with me because I know how to manage the money. They didn't understand the construction. So in the end of the day, it was like, no, dude, you have to learn construction to understand how I'm supposed to work my process, how I work with subs, how I provide bids, how I provide supervision. So what we decided to do was it's time to teach these guys, man. We got to help you guys out because if we can, even in the littlest bit, teach you just basics of project management, basics of rehabbing, you'll be able to level the playing field and have a higher chance of profitability, whether it's single family, multifamily, whether it's buy and hold, whether it's, flipping, whatever. As long as you understand fundamentally a foundation like building a house, right, you have a chance. Because anybody that goes out there right now, and you see it in your industry of multifamily, guys are taking down these deals, going through syndication, going all in at it. They have no idea how to price a door. They have no business pricing a door. They have no idea how to vet a GC. They have no business vetting a GC, right? And what happens a few weeks into that job? There's a lot of problems because they didn't review the risk. So anyway, I can go off all day on this shit. The bottom line is I appreciate you for coming on. Some of the things that I want to touch upon today are a lot of things, as you can imagine. What's happening in the world is very big. What's happening in business and the economy is very big. What's happening with diseases is very big. You started in 2011. For those entrepreneurs who didn't start after the last recession, okay, you're talking 2011. That's in the heat of it, right? How did you get started? What made you get started in 2011, full well knowing what had happened to the marketplace? Foreclosures like crazy, REO like crazy. Did you start off in multi or did you start off in single?
You start off with a duplex, but you got to rewind the clock to really understand that story.
That's right.
So
Go
for
ahead.
me, coming from corporate America, I'll take you back to 2008. So 2008, I'm in Detroit working for General Motors, running advertising for, one of the brands there. And the economic pressure starts to come down, and we at the time think it's just our company. We don't realize that this is something that's going to impact the entire country. We think it's just our company. And then it's clear that it's going to be our industry in our city before it kind of evolves into this overall national economy collapse. So at that time, you're watching everything that takes place. Everyone's really concerned with their jobs. Everyone's really concerned with what's going to happen next. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching my boss's boss on CNN, on Fox News, on MSNBC. Yeah. And this was real because I just had a conversation in the hallway a couple hours ago about where we're at, the state of the business. And a few hours later, I'm watching my boss's boss on CNN talking to Anderson Cooper about it, right? So it was a whole different sense of pressure in the sense of, how much control do you really have over your finances, over your life, over your career? And it doesn't matter how exemplary of an employee you were. The reality is they have to hit certain numbers. And if my name came up, I was going to get slashed. I mean, luckily I didn't. I survived that and I thrived. But in that moment, I realized that I couldn't depend on a corporate job to take care of me and my family going forward. So I started to look into different investment opportunities. I remember that, purple book that I read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and really started to dive deep into real estate, learning more about real estate. It took a couple of years before we pulled the trigger on the first project. But for me, it was more about getting that passive income going, getting kind of another stream of income. So we weren't solely relying upon one job.
Wow. That backstory is perfect because that's actually what was happening all across the board. I mean, my father actually, he lost his home during that time period. That's the irony. He lost his home because he lost his job, right? My dad's he's a corporate guy as well. He got a bachelor's degree. He was the first to go to college. So he had to suffer just like millions of other Americans who had no reason. There was no reason for them to lose their job, but they had to because economics has no prejudice. That's the reality of it, right? Money's not emotional. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. And that's the problem. And he actually came to work for me. And the weird dynamic to that is that I'm in the house flipping business, right? And at that time, what do you think the bread and butter was? REOs. It was foreclosures. And it was really weird. I remember one day sitting across the table from him at Starbucks and we were working and he needed to make money. So I said, come work for, with me, for me, whatever, we'll figure it out. And it was an honor to help my dad, right? And 2, it was like, I got to figure this out. I'm working with my dad, right? And then 3 was, I'm going to show you some properties that are going to remind you of home that we lost, right? Or that you lost. I wasn't living at home. I was an adult. But it was a very wild scenario for him to see it from the perspective of the other side, which is very rarely seen, He was on the emotional, devastated, I lost my home side. I let my family down side to see, like, wow, so you make money from this, you know? Oh, this is how banking works. Oh, okay, you know? So let's speed that up now. So now you've gone through that that rigorous, terrible experience, but in hindsight, it's a phenomenal experience, right? And you start looking at real estate. At what point did you say, okay, I might be in trouble here. GM's going down. We're going to have a problem. What's my next move?
Yeah, so the first thing was find another job, right? I mean, I think anytime you're at a company, again, at that time, we were looking at our company. I wasn't looking at the overall economy was collapsing. I was just like, hey, this company's going down. I need to find another job. So I was interviewing, I was trying to get out there, was having a hard time finding another job that made sense. So once the decision was made to enter bankruptcy, that was actually a huge relief because we had a plan at that point. The hard part was not knowing what was going to happen. So leading up to that, even going through the election process, we
Now you're
were
saying bankruptcy as GM, not personal.
General Motors, yes, yes, yes. As General Motors went into bankruptcy, they had a structured bankruptcy to get in and out in like 45 days.
Mhm.
So that was really the thing that allowed us to have a clear plan and navigate. So for me, as that was taking place, it also made it easier for me to stay in that role while also figuring out my next step, because the urgency for me to leave or find that next job, that was gone, because I knew I was going to have a job. I knew I was going to have a career if I wanted to have a career there. So all of that was laid out. So that helped tremendously, but I definitely didn't lose focus on finding kind of the next opportunity and finding that investment. So I would say, as I, was working there, I worked there another couple of years, and then I moved to Chicago. And part of the reason I moved to Chicago was I felt like it was a better market for real estate investing.
Mhm.
So at that moment, we moved. I took a little bit of time just to get my lay of the land, if you will, and then we bought a 2-unit building. So bought a 2-unit building. I house hacked it, which is a popular approach where you live in one unit, you rent out the other unit, and that was an easy way to get in. And the way I looked at it was, look, if I was going to be paying rent anyway, why not go live in a place where I basically still live in an apartment, but someone else is covering the mortgage at this point? And even if the numbers don't work, if I was a little bit off on my returns, it really doesn't matter because someone else is paying the mortgage. So I wasn't as concerned with hitting a certain return threshold. I wanted to buy in a great neighborhood that was going to appreciate in value, and that was going to be a place that my family, would want to live, a place where I would want to live, and a place where we could attract a quality tenant. And that's really what I use as my criteria on that first property. And then from there, it got a bit more complex as far as trying to figure out the cash on cash returns and make sure all the numbers were tight. But for that first property, it really came down to buying in a great location at the right time.
Understood. So you obviously went through a renovation process, I would imagine, to duplex it down. What was your first initial experience coming into the rehab world? Because I'm sure that was very unique.
Yeah, it was. So the agent that we used was also a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that, there were a lot of benefits to that because he was able to walk us through the process, even from the time we were first looking at the property. So we kind of knew what we wanted to do to the property. We were going to live in the property. So again, budget wise, I wasn't as concerned with, hey, keep it to $7,000, whatever. It's like, well, I kind of want those cabinets. So go ahead and get those cabinets.
Right.
So he did a good job, ran a little bit over timeline wise, but generally speaking, did a really good job of going in and executing that. I think for us, as we learned from that experience, the good thing was that it worked out well. We kind of paid closer to retail prices. So probably a little, it cuts the discount, but it was more retail prices. As we moved on to more true investment properties though, and we needed to have that greater margin on these deals, that's where I think we really learned some lessons as far as managing that construction process and understanding how to look at a bid and what to look for and really understanding what those numbers really mean.
Sure. Back in that time period, there wasn't really an understanding, I would say fully, that was retail versus rehab, right? And that's something we teach all the time, but there's a true retail margin and there's a true rehab margin. And it plays true with rehab materials and retail materials and labor and so on. And then it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. Now, I tell people all the time, you'd be hard pressed to find a contractor who's never done a rehab. You'd be hard pressed to find an investor who hasn't tried to rehab. They can wholesale all day long, whatever. But it's hard pressed to find a guy who's been doing it, a guy or girl that's been doing it and has not tried to rehab these days. It's been, since the 08, 09, 10 era. I mean, that's what it is, right? And when you look at some of these stores like Floor & Decor, Home Depot, and the big box stores, they've actually now have complied with this rehab status and come up with these packages, and they've accommodated a market need, which was a tremendous shift from the time period you were doing it. And even when I was doing it as the contractor during your time period, right, I struggled the same thing because I was trying to explain this to clients and investors, but I still couldn't find those prices though. I mean, we still have to find prices 10% below, or this below. And Home Depot's still too expensive. You know, it's like we got to go to Hobo and hope that they have enough in stock, and then you can't ever return it. So that was a nightmare, but it's a learning experience in hindsight, like it always is as an entrepreneur. So you do the duplex down, your house hacking, which still exists today. It's a beautiful model. I actually have a lot of students and clients that call often about that, trying to create that duplex down, especially on a 203K loan. They're trying to hit a certain threshold and criteria to see if they can even get that fourth bedroom or that fourth unit I meant. So it's interesting how the house hacking is still prevalent, and I don't see anything wrong with it. I really don't. So I think that's a good way to, I think it's a good entryway for a lot of investors to get in the game too, personally, you know, because you get the experience of the acquisition, the rehab, and you're a landlord, right? So you're getting all three at once, man. It's a double whammy. So that's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. I wouldn't be shocked. So the reality is this. You did that duplex down. Where does the itch go from there?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, it's an absolutely phenomenal strategy to get started for the reasons you mentioned. On top of that, you can get phenomenal loans. So you can get an FHA loan with just 3.5% down. So for many people starting out, you know, that's incredible. I mean, to tell you you could buy a $300,000 property for $10,500 out of your pocket, that's crazy. I mean, you could save that amount of money in rent in 1 year. So, you know, it really opens up kind of your options if you're thinking about that. But for me, you know, we got that experience. The next step was really to get a true investment property, right? Because I lived in that property, so it's good to kind of get your feet wet, gain some experience. But next up, we bought a 3-unit building in Avondale. From there, we saved some money. We refinanced that first property. We bought an 8-unit building. And what started to become clear to me was, I love this, and this is exactly what I wanted to do. The only issue was I was saving all of my money in investing it into these properties. So at no point did I ever have real money because we would save money, invested in these properties, save money, invested in these properties. So it got to a point where I said, okay, there has to be a way where I can accelerate this. And as we started talking to more and more people and just letting them know what we were doing, we realized there was an opportunity to kind of partner up together with some of these investors.
Okay. When you started going into the game and moving towards multi, right, you had to learn it somewhere, or at least partner with someone, or get coached or mentored by somebody. Did that help you, or do you feel that you probably picked it up a lot sooner on your own? Because some people believe in mentorship, some people don't.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in mentorship, but I will say with the caveat, you should get mentorship when you're clear on what you're trying to solve. You know, for folks who decide, hey, I want to get into real estate, let me hire a mentor, I don't think that's the right move. You know, I think you need to be clear on what you want to do, or at least the problem you're trying to solve. Because if you can figure it out yourself, by all means, go do that. And for me, that 2-unit building, the 3-unit, the 8-unit, we did all that without any kind of mentorship. I would say that we certainly went to RIA events. We certainly networked. We certainly read a lot of books. We certainly read, listened to a lot of podcasts. So we educated ourselves and we surrounded ourselves with other people who were doing it, but I didn't pay for mentorship or anything like that. Now, when I decided to partner with other investors and take money from other people, that's when I said, you know what, while this is working for me, there may be blind spots that I'm not privy to. There may be things that may not work as we move into different markets or different locations. So because of that, and even just how to structure the partnership and what's fair and equitable and all that kind of stuff, because of that, that's when I decided it was time to get a mentor, because I didn't want to take on passive investors without really having that experience or having somebody kind of in my corner that could overlook deals or provide a little bit more context as far as what's the right way to do things, what's not. And then also to add credibility. You know, while I built a $1.5 million portfolio by myself, the reality is if you're going to go out there and partner with someone else and take their money, you want to make sure that you are doing everything you can to position yourself as the expert to drive a successful execution. And I don't care if that is to go buy a large apartment building or to do a flip. If you're going to flip a house and you've never flipped a house, you probably want to align yourself with someone who has experience flipping houses.
Correct.
That's going to make you more likely to be successful than just reading a couple books and doing it yourself, right? So you have to humble yourself to an extent, or I would say at least put yourself in a position to be logical and critical and remove potential obstacles that may prevent you from having success.
Ooh. So that was like a mentor bubble you just like put out there for the kids, man. The kids are just popping that left and right. That was good. I like that, John. Good share. So one of the big things I took away right off the bat was you have to be clear on what problem you're trying to solve. It's ironic you say that. I took a call this morning from a potential student. She's going through a list of things, and I said, well, which one of those is your problem, though? We all have problems in terms of our business, and I call those challenges. I said, but which one's a problem for you? I said, some of these challenges you can actually figure out with I can just tell you what to do. I said, what's your actual problem? And more often than not, what I realize is the person is the problem. It's the investor themselves who are in their way. And I'm not saying intentionally. Most of the time, they don't realize they're in their way. You don't know what you don't know, right? And it's funny you say that because that's exactly what I said. I go, well, what's the problem? Tell me your problem. You gave me a list of issues, but what's the problem? And it was ultimately that she was a person that was uncertain about coaching, uncertain about coursework and learning. And I told her, I said, then that is a problem because that says you don't want to grow and you're holding yourself back. I said, so it's basically what you said. I go, you're going into a space that you called me for a reason. I'm pretty good at this space. I can advance you by 75%, or you can take your time and do your thing. Choice is yours. So I'm with you on that mentorship coaching thing. That took me a long time personally, as I was going. Remember, I came from a different side. I'm amongst all these top level investors across the country, but I came from a different perspective of it. I came from the contracting side, right? So I was welcome into all these rooms and all these RIAs and all these masterminds, if you will, because of a talent that I brought to the table that I could speak a high level to. And my perspective was always interesting because wholesalers are chasing the same lead gen and they're doing the same thing, and multifamily doing the same thing. And I'd always sit there and go, but you're looking at the building wrong. You're looking at the house wrong. You're not looking at it the way a contractor would look at it. Your acquisition does not even matter if you're not looking at construction, if you choose to alter it. I go, if you're going to do any form of remodel renovation, that number matters first. That's my opinion, because it changes everything. And I've been involved in consulting $500 million in real estate assets across the country for my clients. I've seen these things. I'm like, you bought wrong. I'm like, you can't do this house for $30,000. You can't do this door for $15,000 a door. It needs too much work. You bought wrong. You can't force a profit. And that's why I think mentors and coaches who have been there are extremely valuable. And there's no price tag on that, in my opinion. I mean, not saying they can charge whatever they want, not that at all. But there's no price on value that's going to advance you and say, out of these 10 doors, if I were you, I'd open that door. You can open any door you want, but I would leave those alone and go through that door. That's probably your best bet.
Yeah, and to say that differently, I mean, to your point on the value and putting the price tag on it, that shows where someone is in the process, right? Because if you're questioning whether or not this is valuable and whether or not you should pay for it, then you don't know what problem you're solving, or you don't know what potentially could happen, if you were to buy a house where you underestimated the budget and you underestimated the timeline. So if you're saying, hey, listen, I want to do this rehab, but I want to make sure that we're properly evaluating the risk, that we are being conservative on our timelines, our budget projections, and our ARV, our after repair value, that's where you go and get someone who has that experience. And you recognize that, hey, you know what, for the peace of mind to know that I have someone in my corner who's going to help look at this deal and to underwrite the deal and to walk me through the process and being in my corner when things happen, that's what you're paying for. That's what you're paying for. You can absolutely read a book on how to flip a house and have a good chunk of the knowledge you need to go out and flip a house. So if you're comfortable with that and you're using your own money and you just want to learn, you can absolutely do that. I don't think anybody will question you on that approach. Just understand that for folks who believe in mentorship, they're either trying to cut down the learning curve or they're trying to cut down on the mistakes, right? And trying to figure out how to do that. The other piece too is tapping into someone else's network, because if for someone hiring you, for instance, I'm sure that you have electricians, plumbers, carpenters, and other people that you may be able to recommend or at least give some guidance on as people are looking for those resources. So there's value that comes from those things as well versus, me trying to spend time going on Angie's List or wherever people are going to try to source vendors. That's time consuming. That's a challenge. And if you have a full-time job and you're trying to flip a house on the side, that could be very problematic. So, especially if you with these, blue collar workers where you got to stay on them, you got to make sure crews are on site, when they say they're going to be on site, doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's tough work for somebody who has a full-time job. So you definitely want to make sure you understand how you align yourself, whether that's hiring a mentor, hiring a partner, or partnering up with somebody, I should say, but whatever it is, but just figuring out what problem are you solving, and then how do you reduce the risk or remove that challenge.
Boom. Love it. Love it. So let's talk about your business right now. Okay. You talked about you guys have about $80 million in assets, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
When you look at a property, a building, what's your average size building? How many doors per building on average are you looking at? Do you have a sweet spot as an investor?
Yeah, I mean, so we have two verticals in the way we operate. So one, we kind of align with another operator in a different market where they are boots on the ground. We kind of take a look. Usually those are in the 150 unit and up range. We also like stuff more locally to us where it can be anywhere on the smaller side to say 25, 50 units up to say 150 or 200 units. So depending on my specific role, I kind of shift a little bit, but ultimately we're still looking at the building. We want to understand what's happening, what's the story, what's the backstory of the property, what has current ownership been through, why are they selling, what's the opportunity for us to create value,
Sure.
what's our business plan going to be, how much rehab is needed, what are the market rents. So we try to take in all of that data, which can be a lot of data.
A lot of diligence, a lot of diligence.
It's a lot of diligence. And the first thing is, does this just make sense? You know, is the story that I'm hearing from the seller, does that make sense? Is the market demonstrating that there is an opportunity here, or you know, or someone just being optimistic, try to sell you some BS? So you have to step back and just look at the data that you have, make sense of it, and then figure out, you know, whether or not it's worth the effort. You know, if you were to go out and spend a few $100,000 renovating an apartment complex, would you get the returns that you and your investors are looking for? So that's ultimately what I'm looking at. I also want to de-risk an investment as much as possible. So making sure we look heavily at the market, what's driving the market beyond just us and what we're doing, but are there employers that are driving it? Is there government funding that's driving it? Is there a university nearby?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's happening? If there's a university, is it expanding? Is it, you know, building a new wing? Is it building a new, you know, part of its campus? Is there new infrastructure that's taking place? So trying to understand, will there be more demand in the future than there is today? And that is ultimately the main thing I'm looking at when we look at these properties. And then it's, okay, what do we need to do to capture value for investors? So those are really the main things we do with any property. And I would say on the smaller side, you know, you can get more mom and pop owners. So someone who's got it, who's maybe burned out, they've had it for 20 years, 30 years, you know, it's their retirement, you know, baby, and they're ready to sell this thing. So you can maybe go and work with them and get a good deal. On the larger stuff though, you're not going to be able to buy a large apartment complex for 70 cents on the dollar. I mean, just typically that's not going to happen. You're dealing with more sophisticated owners. You are dealing with folks who have deeper pockets. And
kind of what I was saying earlier, how like over the years, people have really gotten their wits about them with this real estate investing. The ones that have made it past a certain threshold really know what they're doing, you know, and that's how I was saying the evolvement of that over the last 10 years has been incredible.
Yeah, you don't stumble into a $10 million property, right? I mean, you have to have some skill to acquire that. Even if you syndicated and brought it together, that requires a certain level of skill, a certain level of execution to be able to do that. So for us to go in and get value, a lot of times you have to create value. You have to see something that other people don't see.
Yes.
You know, I bought a property where the seller didn't realize it, but they were building there was a warehouse that they had knocked down, and they were going to be building new Class A office buildings right there. And it's only 500 yards away from his property, but he didn't realize that was happening. So that was something that we saw that gave us permission to say, listen, there's a lot of new construction taking place in this area. There's a lot of development, mostly Class A office, not necessarily housing. But our thought was there's going to be more, you know, service jobs that pop up, restaurants, things like that in this area to support the new office buildings. And we can probably attract a little bit of a higher quality tenant base by making renovations to this unit. So we felt justified in knowing that there was going to be demand for higher price rents. So we're looking for things like that, you know, maybe something where another investor will look at the deal, kind of look at the numbers, take them as they see them on paper, but not necessarily understand the larger economic indicators or what's happening in the location, right? Like I bought back in Avondale, go back to 2014. I bought a 3-unit building in Avondale. And one of the main reasons I bought in Avondale was because of its proximity to Logan Square. I was looking in Logan Square, couldn't find anything that I liked in Logan Square. So as we started to expand our parameters, started looking in Avondale. Well, guess what? Renters do the same thing. You know, if you got $1,200 as your budget to rent and you're looking to rent in Logan Square, but you realize, hey man, I don't like what I'm seeing for $1,200 in Logan Square, then you start to expand a little bit and you go to another neighborhood that has the same parameters or same characteristics that Logan Square has, maybe a little bit further away, but it's a little bit more affordable. And that's how renters think, and that's how investors should think, because that's where you're going to find opportunities and you can beat them to the punch. So now you're able to get that equity, because as they catch up and find the path of progress, they're going to elevate kind of rents, they're going to drive up property values, and you can capture that. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at when we're looking at investment opportunities.
I like how you say those are the kinds of things. Bro, you just went on a 10-minute tangent about diligence. So for those of you who are in the space or looking to grow in the space or get into the space, review that last 10 minutes, because what he just said to him is kind of like me. Oh, that's just gospel. This is what we say. But for those listening, that was like, right? That was fire, brother. That was good stuff. This is a perfect transition because of what you're talking about. All the diligence that you put in a good market, right? In a healthy economy, in a non-COVID economy, right? A non-rioting and protesting and racial injustice economy, right? That's all you would do then. How is that going to change for you now? What are your projections in terms of, I guess, just anticipation? You can't really, nobody knows what the hell's going to happen. Nobody does. But the reality is all the diligence you put into looking at colleges, for example, or new construction in the area, for example, or a Class A building being built, for example, that might change now. So what, as you put it, how do some of your prerequisites or your requirements going to, I guess, be modified to accommodate a deal? Because you're still not going to not look for deals.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing is, we try to lay the best plans we can. Certainly can't plan everything, but we try to lay the best plans we can. So a lot of the underlying economic indicators will still be true coming out of COVID when it comes to population, when it comes to jobs and things like that. There are going to be some major changes though. So for us, part of it is being able to pivot. And when I say pivot, what I mean is you may have bought a property with the plan to go in and renovate 100% of the units and pour $5,000 into each unit to get another $100 and $150 in rent. Well, you may want to pause that right now. You may want to say, listen, let's just focus on retaining the current residents and maintaining what we're doing. You may need to bring your projections down, because if you can weather the storm, which is the most important thing, you have to be able to weather the difficult parts. And we thought that was going to happen in March and April. The reality is most residents paid their rent March and April. So most landlords actually did really well. As a property owner, we're still cautious. We're optimistic, but we're cautiously looking forward to July, August, September, particularly when some of the benefits may run out, right? So what happens if unemployment benefits run out? Will people stop paying rent at that point? These are questions we have to ask ourselves, right? So we want to have more.
How did rent go through the second quarter for you guys?
They've been great. We've collected pretty much what we've been collecting up to this point. So had no issues as far as rent collection.
Good. Continue. I always want to bring that up. Yeah. I think it's important. People for real perspective, right?
Yeah.
I don't want people to throw fluff like, oh yeah, we collect all our rent when you've gotten 72% every time.
Yeah. Well, and I will say some of them have lagged other properties, and their delinquencies have gone up a little bit, where it's lagged a little bit in the time to collect the rent. So we have been collecting it. And I would say part of that is also just the human nature, right? If you come in as Billy Badass and you tell people, hey, pay rent and you're getting out, especially when there's a moratorium on evictions, I mean, you just look like an asshole. So if you don't want to do that, I think the more important thing is to understand that people are going through it. Everybody's going through it right now. So you try to work with people and say, okay, did you lose your job? Are you furloughed? Okay, well, what can you pay? File for unemployment, file for the benefits. Here's how you do it. You may need to take a minute and actually tell people how to do it if they've never done it before. And if you can help them do that, then you help them pay you, which I think is the main thing that people want to see right now, because they want a sense of normalcy as well. So we've been able to do things like that. But as far as strategizing and how we pivot and how we adjust, I mean, a lot of it is continuing to talk to people, having conversations like this. We're doing a Facebook Live, or actually a webinar on Thursday. We're talking about the economic outlook for the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. So we're going to be doing that. So we just try to stay plugged in and just learn from other people. And I will say that's one thing about multifamily investing that's a little bit different than some of the other strategies, is that we talk to each other all the time. So, it's not like I'm just out there, doing my thing and hoping it works out and not really paying attention to what the guy down the street is doing. We're always talking to the guy down the street. We're understanding, hey, what are you going for? What are you getting for rents? Are you collecting? Did you have this issue? Did you have that issue? How are you doing this? How are you, are you charging for laundry? Are you charging for storage? So we're having those conversations. And I think that makes life much easier because we're not really competing. I mean, most of us aren't even in the same markets. Most of us aren't even going after the same assets. So, I can have open conversations about the business with somebody without the threat that they may swoop in and kind of take a property from me. So we're able to have those conversations about best practices and all of those different things. So for us, we take those conversations, we implement the things that make the most sense. And if I could give your listeners kind of 3 things as far as how to prepare for post-COVID, racial injustice, and just the world that we're living in. First and foremost, cash reserves, making sure that you are properly capitalized for your properties, making sure you have money sitting in the bank. Number 2, focus on optimization. What I mean by that is, if you have tenants there, try to keep your occupancy high. It's not the time to be kicking out a bunch of people, because if you were to kick out people who didn't pay rent, you're probably going to be attracting other people who are leaving whatever their situation was, which might be for the same exact reason. So you're just trading the same players back and forth. So I would focus on maintaining your current occupancy. And then the third thing is pay close attention to your loan and your lender relationships. Because if you have a loan that's coming due this year or next year, you may not know where the interest rates are going to be. You may not know where the value of your property is going to be. So make sure you're having the conversations with your lenders, keeping them at ease. Don't overdo it, but make sure that you are building that relationship. So if you need to refinance, or as you're ready to, pivot or do something there with your property, that you have that relationship in place, and I think those are the 3 things to help you navigate anything that's coming up. It just allows you to stay in a cash position where you're not forced to sell prematurely.
Oh, those are good nuggets. So I'm just going to repeat that for everybody. So top 3 pieces of advice that John's giving you right now is cash reserves, which I think is gospel across the game. I think everybody in the investment game, no matter what you invest in, understands right now what the last 14, 15, 16 weeks has been like, right? Nothing but anxiety and cash reserves, right? Second thing, optimizing, keeping your current occupancy rate as current as possible, keeping the same tenant base, because you are right. People don't realize you are just trading a bad player for a bad player, and they're probably coming from the same situation as to why they're a bad player. It's interesting dynamic. I like that a lot. And then the last one, obviously, is to continue cultivating that loan relationship and checking on it to make sure you know what you need to do, where the rates are, if it's coming due, all of that. That's fire, brother. I appreciate all of that information. I think our listeners got a lot of good insight on the multi-unit side of this thing. I saw you on a call not too long ago. You were with Corey Peterson, a buddy of mine who's in a bunch of masterminds with me. I know Corey. So he and I are in different masterminds together. So he's always bringing good nuggets from that side of the fence, and I enjoy listening to that. Let me go with this now. The big problem around the country. We know what it is, right? You're a black man, you're a father. I'm a Puerto Rican guy, I'm a father, right? We're all minorities. It's a problem. It's not cool. It's a big, big problem. It's an economic issue. It's a national issue. It's a people person issue, man. How is this affecting your business, but more importantly, your psyche as a black business owner and as a father and as a husband, honestly?
Yeah, man. Thank you for asking the question.
Of course.
I would say, for me, I've had a lot on my mind over the last few weeks. My kids are little. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So trying to help them understand what's happening. I mean, you got to go all the way back to COVID, right? I mean, you have all of this taking place on top of COVID. First of all, you have a lot of stressed out people. You have a lot of tension right now in America in general, just through COVID, right? So now you add kind of the social unrest and the racial injustice that's taking place, and trying to explain this to 2 small boys, and they really don't understand what's happening, right? They don't understand that they're different, that the world may see them as different. Yeah. And for me, I've always recognized that, but I'm of the belief that you carry yourself the way you want the world to treat you. And, If you treat me differently, that's really on you. It's not on me, right? So I don't necessarily internalize some of those things, but at the end of the day, I can't control how, if someone else has power over me in a situation where they can pull a weapon, I don't necessarily have anything that we can do there. So I think part of it is understanding that, we can't let these things get to us, but we also can't stay silent and be complicit in it as well, right? So there's a fine balance of making sure that you stand up for these injustices, while also not letting it, be take over who you are, take over your soul to the point where you're just an angry individual. Because if you
Yeah,
do,
right.
you can watch the news all day and just be sitting there super pissed and just really angry.
Yes.
So for me, it's a matter of, continuing to understand privilege, and all of us have privileges. I mean, the fact that I could sit here in the middle of my house during COVID and just realize that, oh, the rest of the world is now sitting at their house too, as opposed to really being a different thing for me, that's privilege. The fact that I don't have to worry. I mean, depending on what neighborhood I'm in, I don't worry about the cops. I don't have to worry about certain things. Now, I certainly know that certain places I go, I'm just like you said, they just gonna see a black guy. So,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be mindful of these things. But I think ultimately it's about how you carry yourself. And for me, from a psyche standpoint, it took a minute because the biggest challenge that I think I faced was, one, accepting this and accepting what happens next. People understanding why the reaction is what it is. People understanding that, Colin Kaepernick, and I don't care what you think about Colin, the point I'm making is he was trying to do a silent protest. And I don't even think it was a protest. I think he was just really trying to raise attention
Mm-hmm.
to social injustice, which now everyone is throwing their hands up. Well,
I think he did. He raised a lot of attention, but he didn't get the attention that he
but he was
trying
vilified
to get.
for it.
Yeah.
But he was
Exactly.
vilified for it, and he was crystal clear that he was not disrespecting the flag. He just wanted to raise awareness, and the reason he took a knee as opposed to sitting on the bench or whatever was because he felt that was a way to respect the America's heroes, our Marines, our soldiers, while still recognizing that there's work to be done in this country. Now, people can interpret that and turn those words or turn that image however they want to turn it. And I think they've done that over the last 2 or 3 years. And I think now you have players coming out, the NFL commissioner, other people who are coming out and saying, "Oh, we need to do something about this." And the reality is, it's a tough thing to solve, and I understand these are not simple issues. This is not a Band-Aid situation, but I will say
It's a
that
deep
it
rooted system.
it is, but it starts with empathy and listening and understanding. And I think too many people are ready to judge, and we have to kill this cancel culture, man. We gotta be able to listen, and in listening, someone's gonna say something that you disagree with, and you have to be able to just bite your tongue and listen, and not necessarily be ready to speak. This isn't about who gets the last word and who's right. It's about listening to someone's perspective and their experiences in life. And if they feel a certain way, there's a reason they feel that way, and we can gain a lot more by listening to people. And I don't think that happens. There's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell called Talking to Strangers, or Talking with
You
Strangers.
said Malcolm
And
Gladwell?
Malcolm Gladwell is Talking with Strangers. And he starts the book by trying to explain how Sandra Bland died. Sandra Bland was down in Houston. She was going to the university's campus. She was stopped by police, and what should have been a simple, stop sign violation ended up with her, dying in prison, dying in jail, and it really just breaks down all these things. And the short of it is this: when, like you and I, you just mentioned Puerto Rican, black man, we know without ever having to speak to each other, there are certain things on this planet that we have in common, that we understand, both as
Yep.
fathers, right? We understand we have father culture together, we have minority culture together, we have entrepreneurs, real estate things
Mhm.
together.
Mhm.
So there's a shared um, acknowledgement of those things. And what happens is, there's a community that is naturally there, and race is a part of it. But I think it's an important thing, but it's not the only thing. I would really wish we were talking more about how to better utilize police. How do we actually, get the right policing that we need in different communities, because each community needs different levels of policing. There's mental health issues. There's a whole other array of challenges that we face. So it's tough. And from a business standpoint, the challenge that I just face is, you know, how much of that do we talk about?
Mhm.
You know, how much of that, because that's not my business, right? That's a John Casmon personal thing,
Mhm.
but that's not necessarily the business. And I think, it's important to be truthful and bring yourself to the business. But you also have to balance that because people have different perspectives. And like I said, I think it's important to respect people's perspectives and understand where they're coming from, even if you disagree with them. But from a business standpoint, we're at a point now where it's cool to stand up. It's cool to voice these things. And I want to see real change, in the most positive way possible. I want to see people who really are committed to the changes. And for these companies and CEOs and everyone who's coming out saying stuff, I hope that they are really looking at their organizations and saying, how can we truly invest in these communities? Not just writing a $500,000 check or $1 million
Right.
check,
Right.
but how do we look at our C-suite executives? How do we diversify this room? How do we better market our services and our products to these groups? If you believe in them, then you should, be trying to grow and sell your products to these individuals as well. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm excited that there's conversations happening. Certainly, I don't approve of the looting and the rioting and things like that. And I don't necessarily think that those are all coming from the same people that the narrative is saying.
Right. Right.
But nonetheless, I think that it's a lot of pent up frustration, and we're seeing what happens when people have been frustrated for a long time, and right on top of COVID, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, I agree with you 100% without question. I mean, a lot of people, I don't share a lot of my personal information out in the public. Our brand is raw, it's bold. I say what's on my mind. People know it. We've created that brand on purpose. I want the right client, the right student, the right partner, not everybody. So we've created that aura for ourselves. So I can say what I really want anytime I want. And if it's not for you, so be it. But the reality is, one of the things and I was asked by one of my clients, beautiful black woman, right? Powerful black woman. She used to work as a senior executive, C-level executive. I want to say at Humana back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And she was up there. She took her severance. She retired. She was damn near 60 years old. Very successful, very smart. Got into investing. I was helping her, right? One of my students. And we had lunch one day, and she asked me a question that I was taken back by because I'd never been asked this question. She goes, "How did you rise to the top being a minority?" And I was laughing, going, "I was going to ask you the same thing," right? Because we were just, having fun. And I said, you know what I realized in that moment? I said, I think what I've always been is a conduit and a bridge between upper class and lower class because I could speak both languages. And it was one of the things that I literally sat there. I remember we were at PF Chang's. We sat there, and I said, I think I've always been able to work with multimillionaires, and they trusted me because they know that I would go back and talk to the people they don't want to talk to, right? That's a fact. And at the same time, if you want to call them lower class, if you want to call them broke or poor, whatever you want to call them, that's your business. They didn't really know how to speak to the level, right? So they go through me, right? So I was always in that middle, and I realized I'm a conduit, I'm a bridge, and there's a lot I could do with that. But I had to figure out how, because you can't piss off one party, not the other. It's business, right? And then you get to a point where you have children, right? And I had my twins, and I looked and I said, all bets are off. It changes everything, right? I am who I am. That my DNA is my DNA. I look the way I look. I act and say what I'm going to say. I come from where I come from, right? That's what it is, man. And I realized that ultimately, yes, I'm a bridge and a conduit, but I did make a difference in the industry that I'm in because I was able to show that I can come from being not just being a contractor, but getting to the highest levels of this game and now teaching it and running a software app and whatnot. So I'm a big advocate when it comes to this racial tension and racial injustice. Huge. I just, it doesn't sit well with me. The next question I'm going to ask you is a question I've never been asked, and I don't think it affects me, honestly, as much as it probably affects you, is are you scared for your children as they grow? Because if you ask me that, I can't relate to you, and I know that, right? I'm not going to say I can't, but I'm not scared for my children, right? But I ask you as a father, a black man, are you scared for your children?
I wouldn't say that I'm scared for my children, just because I don't believe living in fear is very conducive to anything. Just walking around scared doesn't really helpful. I will do the same things that my parents did for me. I will teach them about the world. I will teach them about injustice and prejudice, and try to do my best job to make sure that they are not contributing to the problem. But I'll also teach them how to protect themselves, how to stay alert, how to
Sure.
navigate various situations. But I don't walk around fearful of them, just because I also I'm excited. I mean, the young generation right now, and what's happening right now, I know a lot of people are upset, but I really believe that they are doing all of these things to really get real change.
Mm,
And I think by the time, another decade from now, when my kids are, approaching those teenage years, I think they're going to be in a world where, um, I'm not saying the racial tension is gone, because I'm not, I'm certainly not that naive, but I do think that there's going to be accountability
mm,
for the actions that people take. And I think that's all people really want. All Black people really want. I mean, they're not asking for, crazy things. What they're asking for is there needs to be accountability if someone does something that's against the law, whether you're a cop or not. And if you have the ability to go out and kill someone and go home at night and have nothing happen, that's a problem. You need to be on your job and take as much caution, whether or not, the person you're arresting is African American, Puerto Rican or white. And I think that's all they want. If someone's doing something, by all means, let him have his day in court. That's what this is for. We're not talking about harassment necessarily. I can live with you stopping me just because you're trying to figure out why I'm driving this car or whatever, but I need to go home. That's the thing we're talking about. So I do believe that you're going to see changes there, as we talk about police reform and things like that. And I think that's a great start. But I'm not going to be fearful for my kids. I'm going to,
good.
continue to empower them the best we can, make sure that they understand, situations and not walking around, blinded. I think that's part of the issue too. We got a lot of people who've been coddled. A lot of young people have been coddled. Folks who grew up in neighborhoods, never saw a Black person till like college, and didn't really understand, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. Like, this is eye opening for people. And I'm like, I've seen this my entire life.
Yeah.
So, for me, there's nothing to be scared about, because this is the world I know. Like, if you don't know this world, if you came from another country and you were dropped in here, then I could understand you being fearful. But I mean, this is kind of what I knew, and I don't mean that in a bad way or anything like that, but it's our experiences, and your experiences is all you have in this world. And I think as parents, what we want to do is create better experiences for our children, and that's what my focus is on. My focus is helping them to have better experiences where their world and what they know is a little bit of a better version of what I had. And I think that's what any parent is trying to do. Any parent wants their kids to be in a better situation. So, and I go back to empathy. I mean, that's what I'm talking about, right? It's we're not asking for something crazy. We're just simply trying to live the world and leave it in a better place than what we inherited.
mm, mm. I think that sums it up, brother. I mean, that's really what it is. Your insight on that is, I think, is extremely important. One thing I've learned as I've grown myself as an entrepreneur is you get to a point where you become influential, whether that's what you set out to be or not. It's people remind you of maybe your stature before you see it. Some people go out there for ego and they're talking shit all day long, and you look at them and go, no. But then there's other people you're like, I kind of want to hear what you have to say, right? And sometimes you get put on a spot like, well, what do you have to say? And you're sort of going, oh shit, it's game time, right? And in today's day and age, you brought up something earlier in the conversation where today's kids now, it's cool to speak up, right? And I do agree. I think that the younger generation, although I think they're soft, I think they're speaking up for something that actually matters now. But ultimately, I agree with you. I think they're raised soft. I think there's less ass whoopings and too many hugs and kisses. You and I were raised differently. We know it. I guarantee it. And it was for the better. Times change. I get that. But at the end of the day, some of these kids still need some ass whoopings. All right. And COVID, I'm sure, brought that out. But the reality of this is what I'm saying is I believe exactly everything you're saying. I believe in everything you're saying. And I agree with everything you're saying. And I'm glad that you were able to share that live. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that look up to you and respect you in this industry like I do, who definitely want to hear your opinion, because at the end of the day, it's an educated opinion. And there is a difference. And I'm not being prejudiced, because I can't be. My point is, it's an educated opinion, and I wanted to hear your opinion. So I very much appreciate you going that route for a little bit with me. And that's what Borderline Inappropriate is all about. It's an open dialogue about what's happening in business and in the economy and in the country. And right now, there's a hell of a lot going on. Let's close on this, John. What's the outlook for John Casmon 2021? What's the plan for you? Where are you going? What's the deal? Where's the business?
Yeah, so we're going to continue to look at apartments. I mean, obviously, we're going to be very mindful of what kind of deals we do and making sure we're being conservative in our projections. And we're actually spending more time helping people from a marketing standpoint. You know, as we talked about it, right now it's really tough time to figure out what to say, getting those marketing messages tight.
Right.
And I think that especially for some folks who have conservative viewpoints, it's tough because you don't want to offend people, but you also don't want to come across as phony. And I think that there is a way to convey what you believe in from a positive standpoint without distracting and tearing someone else's beliefs down. So that's something we're trying to help people with. And that's both sides, right? Because I'm not talking about hate. I'm just talking about if you believe in God and you're God-fearing, church-going person, that you have certain beliefs. And we want to make sure that you don't feel that you can't convey what those things are. There's an audience. And that the panel you mentioned, was about building a thought leadership platform. And part of what we talked about was attracting your tribe. And in order to attract your tribe, you have to be willing to, let go of some people who don't fit, or maybe who have disagreements or don't fit your view. And you don't have to be crass. You don't have to, do things that are over the top to reject people or get some people really excited. But I do think you have to be clear on who you can help, who is the best client for you, who can you help, who do you serve, and how can you help them. So for us, we recognize that there are a lot of people who have businesses, a lot of investors, a lot of people looking to attract investors who need a little bit of help figuring out how to navigate today's times, how to navigate social media, how to create content that actually attracts investors or allows them to find deals. So we're spending a little bit more time doing that as well. We'll continue doing that through 2021.
Perfect. One last thing. If your kids were watching this right now, how would you close this off? What's your bit of advice?
Man, the best thing I would say to them is to follow your heart and do everything with effort. Anything you do it with passion, do it with effort. Focus on the effort, not the results. So, if you have success, let the success be due to the work, but don't bank on winning every game. Don't bank on hitting every shot. Don't bank on closing every deal, but put in the effort so you understand what it takes to have success, and focus on the effort. If you're great because of the effort. You're not great because you just were naturally born with talent or anything like that. It's all due to the effort that you put in.
Outstanding, brother. Tell the world how to get a hold of you. How do they find out about John Casmon?
Yeah, if you want to check out our episode with Ryan Garcilaso back in episode 20, you can go to Target Market Insights. It's available anywhere you check out podcasts. And then if you're interested in investing in multifamily and you want to check out a sample deal, I do have a sample deal package on my website. You can go to casmoncapital.com/sample deal. And if you just want to shoot me a note and say, hey, appreciate the line you heard, you can shoot me an email. My email address is john@casmoncapital.com.
I'll post all that on the feed as we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to obviously download this, put it on our YouTube channel. This will go for 24 hours. I'll send you the link. You can do whatever you'd like with that channel, brother. So
appreciate it.
That's John Casmon, man. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Outstanding, brother. Outstanding. I love the topics that we were able to talk about. And I appreciate you being vulnerable, honest, and open, but keeping it real. That's the idea.
Man.
So a couple last minute housekeeping ideas. Don't forget we have our boot camp coming up in July. It's the rental rehab boot camp. So we're going to teach you how to create your rental rehabs, how to manage it, how to project management, the whole nine, how to run that thing efficiently. It's a 3-day camp. Another thing we have is our online academy, continue learning online all day long without issue. And we're also going to be teaming up with Privy to talk about some lead generation tomorrow at 2 p.m. So log in for that. It's a free training webinar. We got so much going on, brother. I got so much going on, dude. It's incredible. I got to think about all of it. I should write it down. Even then, I wouldn't remember it. But anyway, anything you need, call this guy, John Casmon, in the multifamily unit space. He's got you. Don, I love you. Much respect, much love. Take care of yourself. I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Sounds good. Thank you, brother. Take care.
Later.